So for the last few days, at least in our home, we were traveling to Ohio and back with a number of people in the car, including a 2-year-old. And I had forgotten all the musical selections that a 2-year-old likes to listen to. So last night, as I was sleeping, I had this dream, and I did have this dream. I'm relieved to be up here preaching, because in my dream, I was standing here, except instead of preaching, I was supposed to sing. And the music I was supposed to sing Under the Sea from The Little Mermaid. And I was having a difficult time getting out, "We got a hot crustacean band" in a Jamaican accent. And I was terrified from having to do that. So I'm relieved to be up here speaking instead of trying to sing songs from Frozen, Little Mermaid, The Lion King, and other things I'm sure that I'm missing. And it's going to take me quite some time to get those songs out of my head this week, because we heard them over and over and over again. So there's also, there we go. I wanted to say this. Remember, we have this little mascot bear. Until someone names him different, I'll call him Monday Bear. And Monday Bear has already made his first trip. This is in Oxford, England. And my understanding is that Monday Bear will be going to Hawaii this week. And so when you're going somewhere, let us know, and you can take Monday Bear along with you and take a picture. Now, you think, "Pastor, you are wasting our time with these silly pictures of where the stuffed bear is." I have a point to make in all of this. At the end of the year, I want us to see how many different places in the world this bear goes. Only to illustrate the fact is we underestimate the influence and impact that we have. I know this bear is going to make it to Israel later and a few other places. It'll be interesting to see how many points of the globe this bear goes, so you can see how far across the globe our impact, our lives reach. So anyway, let us know, and you can take a Monday Bear along with you. So I'm going to preach out of Deuteronomy chapter 8 this morning. We hear a time where it seems like so often we are called to think about the future. And even it seeps into our religious life and our religious world. And we say, what is the Lord going to do? And pray for what the Lord will do. And go after your miracle that God will accomplish in the future. And it's all this stuff about the future. I'm not putting any of that down. But what's interesting to me is when I go through the Bible, how often our command is not to think about the future, but simply we're called to remember what God has done. Read the 10 Commandments in Exodus, which starts off, "Remember when you were slaves in Egypt. The Lord your God delivered you out of bondage, out of slavery. Therefore, have no other gods before me." Every time we meet as a church and we take communion together, we're called to remember. And sometimes it's very good to simply remember. So I'm reading out of Deuteronomy chapter 8. "Be careful to follow every command I'm giving you today, so you may live and increase and may enter and possess the land that the Lord promised on oath to your forefathers. Remember how the Lord your God led you all the way in the desert these 40 years to humble you and to test you in order to know what was in your heart, whether or not you would keep his commands." I'm moving on just down to verse 6. "Observe the commands of the Lord your God, walking in his ways and revering him. For the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land, a land with streams and pools of water, with springs flowing in the valleys and the hills." Verse 8. "A land of wheat and barley, of vines and figs and pomegranates, a land where bread will not be scarce and you will lack nothing. So verse 10, when you have eaten and are satisfied, praise the Lord your God for the good land he has given you. And be careful that you do not forget the Lord your God, failing to observe his commands, his laws, and his decrees that I am giving you this day. Otherwise, when you eat and are satisfied, when you build fine houses and settle down, and when your herds and flocks grow large, and your silver and gold increase, and all you have is multiplied, then your heart will become proud, and you will forget the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. He led you through the vast and dreadful desert, that thirsty and waterless land, with its venomous snakes and scorpions. He brought you out of hard rock. He gave you manna to eat in the desert, something your fathers had never known. I'm just skip down to verse 17. You may say to yourself, my power and the strength of my hands have produced this wealth for me. But remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you the ability to produce wealth, and so confirms his covenant which he swore to your forefathers, as it is today. I just want to talk about remembering. We should remember what Jesus has done for us. All of us. And sometimes that's easier for some of us than others. Some people have this wonderful, fantastic story about all that they were involved in. It's all that they were doing. And maybe they were, I was running around. Maybe I was involved with drinking. I was all this other thing. And some of us have this very boring story. I'm one of those people with the boring story. I was raised in the church. I don't have any big miraculous story where I was this way and now I'm that way. I've kind of always been in the church all my life. Didn't have any really big time of rebellion as a teen. None of that. No one would be impressed. But yet I can tell you I'm a different person because of what Jesus Christ has done. I think I would hope I'm less selfish. I'm less self-involved, less prideful, less arrogant, less a whole host of other things that I don't think I would be on my own. See, we're called to remember, and that's not just a mental exercise. But it actually is supposed to change the way we behave. That was the whole purpose of the Ten Commandments. Remember the Lord your God. Look at everything he's done. Therefore, out of gratitude. Not out of a sense of rules and you have to do it or God's going to get you. But because look at what God has done. Therefore, your life should change. I had a marvelous quote from N.T. Wright. I'd written it out and I don't have it right here. I know where it is. It's sitting on my end table at home. And the N.T. Wright quote went something like this. Back in this first century, they were not called to just remember, but they were called as a basis of this to change their behavior. To follow Jesus Christ meant not just a mental exercise, but it meant changing every action of every hour of every day. The gods then, as the gods now, I'm paraphrasing N.T. Wright, did not take kindly to switching allegiances because gods need to be honored, they need to be appeased, they need to be appealed to. And when Jesus Christ comes into a life, it changes everything, every part of what we do. When we remember, it changes our life. I would like to think, as we were driving home just Thursday, my brothers moved from the one end of town to the other end of town, so we've kind of changed our route home. And the way we go back home now is kind of similar, at least the end, to where we used to 25, 30 years ago, but haven't in a while. And we found ourselves down on the road. And as we got there, I told my wife, I said, wait a minute, we're getting close. Let's see if we can find the telephone pole that we knocked down in your Chevy Monza back in 1984. When the road was icy and we flew off the road. there's the curve, there's the farmhouse. Well, it's either one of these two. 25 years ago was much easier. One looked really newer than the other. And I think I said in the car, I think that's the telephone pole we paid for 35 years ago. And my wife said, no, I think that's the telephone your mother paid for 35 years ago. And I said, I think you're correct. We're remembering. It's funny how that accident that ended up being okay, when there was no serious damage done, we just ended up with a car 50 yards out in a muddy, snowy cornfield. How much the memory of that accident still impacts the way I think about driving, even when I think it's okay in the middle of winter in an evening to be careful about ice and all that sort of thing. The memory, remembering, changes how I act. Well, I don't know, remember all the... When we do remember, what's interesting about our life is good things tend to happen. The absence of bad habits will inevitably change our lives for the better. The absence of sin ends up making life better for a lot of different reasons. As does the presence of good habits. The way I use my time is better. The way I use my resources is better. And so inevitably after 10 years, after 20 years, after 30 years, things have a way of accumulating. And it's easy to sit there and say, oh, because of my goodness or because of a changed life, God is rewarding me with this and this and this. And I'm not sure that's the case. And I don't think it's a divine reward, but rather an inevitable outcome of some of the things that we do. If we're good stewards, I think good things happen. I'd like to think, well, after a while, there were years, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, some of you have done this. I was in grad school, and we were passing each other at a point of the day. I would be working and doing some grad school stuff, and at some point I'd come back and we'd hand off kids, and I would say hi to my wife in a brief 10-second thing, and she'd head out the door and she'd go work in the evening. And we had the envelope system. Some of you know the envelope system. We had so much money for this, and we had so much money for that, and we had so much money for groceries. And if it was December 27th and that envelope was empty, a lot of peanut butter the last 3-4 days of the month. Or hot dogs or whatever else was in the refrigerator. And we were pretty diligent about that for a number of years. And hopefully diligent about savings and some other things. And as the years go by and savings build up and you just stay diligent about some things, there's decisions you make when you're 25 and 30 that it might take to 50 before you see the benefit. And you go, well, God has directly blessed me because I'm good. Well, maybe, but I think also there's some inevitable outcomes to some things. If you are just a good steward, if you're a good steward in your relationships, you'll tend to have good relationships. If you're a good steward with your marriage, you'll tend to have a better marriage. If you're a good steward with your money, you'll tend to be a little better off down the line. And part of that's just the inevitable outcome of avoiding some things that are bad and doing some things that are good. When we remember how blessed we are, when we remember how fortunate we are, when we remember how God has blessed us, we tend to be a little more wise with some of the things that we do. My grandmother, I tell a lot of stories. My grandmother, I think, late 90s somewhere she died. My wife would probably know. She pays more attention to my family stories than I do. My grandmother, even when she died convinced I'm sure she was convinced that the Great Depression was just a week or two from coming back. Everything was just in this pause. The way she lived her life, how frugal she was with everything, because she was convinced it was coming back. We remember certain things. We remembered a lot this Christmas. It was a little different. I've already shared a little bit. We went home to Ohio and came back yesterday. And we were going in, we were, well, okay, this will probably be the last Christmas that told the kids that Grandma will remember who you are. It's very likely. And so, and while she remembers everyone, it's not the same person that's been through the years. And so we remembered a little bit. We remembered because what was there was a little different. Remembering has a way of cushioning us in life. There's this in Deuteronomy 8. Remember how the Lord your God has led you these 40 years. And because you remember, observe the commands of the Lord, walking in His ways, because the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land. Well, there's another, not only remember, but then once you're there, the phrase is here, do not forget. One of the things that happens if we forget, it kind of changes life a little bit. We should never believe that we are the source of all the good things that happen to us. I see that's hard. Because after a series of good decisions, and I'm glad they're good decisions, the temptation is to believe that I'm the source of every good thing that happens to me. Boy, I'm glad that I'm wise, or I'm smart, or I do this. Not like all those folks. And because of all the things that I've done, look at the good things that have happened. Now, there's a danger there. Now, I want you to hear me. I'm glad you make all those decisions. And I'm not putting down in any way or diminishing your hard work or diminishing your good decisions. In fact, I want to celebrate them. And come alongside and encourage you to keep doing it. But there's always a level where we are the beneficiary of grace and other kindnesses that were extended to us that do not flow from us. I'm the beneficiary of a host of things. I'm the beneficiary of love in a family, and I can feel this because that's not the family that I was born into. And I was adopted when I was young, and I'm the beneficiary. Oh, there were some struggles along the way, but I was the beneficiary of some grandparents and a mother and all those things in a wonderful church growing up that I had nothing to do with. Some of us were born with aptitudes and skills and talents that we have that have benefited us, that we also had nothing to do with. I remember third grade. Mrs. Dodds. How do I remember who my teacher was? It was a different era back in 1973. We weren't quite as sensitive to all the feelings in class as we are right now. And in 1973, when it came to math time, here's what you did. The first two kids stood up, and the teacher had flashcards, multiplication or division, and would do the flashcard. And whoever got the answer first then got to move on to the next desk. And the kid that lost had to sit down. And then the kid took on the next person in class, and the winner moved on to the next desk. Until you went through the whole class, and whoever was still standing at the last desk was the winner. I liked to win. After about 2 weeks of doing this, my reward was I was not allowed to do the math stuff in my class anymore. I had to go to the principal's office. Not for anything bad, but to do some other math stuff. Sometimes it's good we have aptitude that we weren't born into the world with. That we were born in the world with has nothing to do with us. And we have the advantages of all those things. We also have the advantages of everything that came before us. We have the advantages of parents, of grandparents, of what Jesus Christ accomplished on the cross. That's why we're asked to remember. God is reminding us here in Deuteronomy 8, when you eat and are satisfied, when your herds grow large, and when everything increases, do not forget, because your heart may become proud, and you will forget the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. Remembering as a means of keeping us grounded. Remembering has a way of keeping us at peace. Remembering has a way of keeping us grateful. The one trait I wished on everyone's life is gratitude. Gratitude as a means of keeping us happy and joyful. You have met people who all they can want to talk about and remember is, this didn't happen to me when I was 10, this didn't happen to me when I was 13, and there's a bitterness that builds up through life instead of sitting and being grateful. The reward for remembering is you eventually get more of God. In fact, there's nothing here that says, if you obey me, then I will continue to bless you and I'm going to be giving you this stuff. Because it says here, even if you forget, you still have all these fine houses. So our encouragement is to not forget. Unfortunately, many of us do. And if we do, it doesn't mean that all our good will go away. We all know people who are maybe unfairly blessed, or at least in our eyes they are. Slowly we become more proud. Slowly we become more self-centered. Slowly we become more disconnected. Slowly we become a little more isolated from everyone else because we are proud of our stuff and it's my stuff and I earned this stuff and it's all about me. And if you listen to all the commercials right now, you deserve it. This is what you deserve. Everything is feeding into your sense of your own goodness. Deuteronomy is trying to keep us from doing that. At the end of the year, I think it's a time for us to stop and look back and maybe be thankful for some things. And I hope 2020 ends up being a wonderful year. But before we end 2019, let's stop and take stock and just be thankful for all the good things that God has done for us. We have a lot for which we are thankful. Even in the midst of some struggle, we can be thankful. I'm thankful for, I got to hear a 2-year-old call me grandpa for the first time this year. That's kind of fun. I didn't think it would be that special, but it really, really is. I got to see that same one kind of look at a Christmas tree, and that's really special. Coming home from Wisconsin one night, a semi-truck in front of me threw off their big tread, and it was coming for my car, and I had no place to go. It was in a construction area. It was right up against the concrete barricade, and the car was next to me. And yes, it hit my front bumper, and I had to get my front bumper replaced, but I'm thankful it didn't hit my windshield. I'm thankful it didn't hit me. I'm very thankful for God's involvement in my life. And when I hear people, and I hear sometimes people say, I'd love to go back and relive my teen years or high school years. Oh, not for all the money in the world. I'm thankful that God had took whatever that person was and has sawed off and continues to polish off the rough edges. and continues to find dead spots and encourages me and points out those dead spots to me and encourages me to pursue ways of life and not pursue those cold, old, dead ways again. I'm thankful for how I hope the Lord has made me a better person through these years. I'm thankful for the involvement of all of you in my life. I consider it one of the great blessings of life. It is worth remembering the good. Our command here is not only to remember, but do not forget. And it's a little bit reminder. The danger of me saying to myself, as it says in verse 17 and 18, I might be tempted to say, my power and the strength of my hands have produced all this for me. But remember the Lord your God, for it's He that gives you the ability. And it's He that confirms His relationship with you. One He had with the people who've come before you, and the one that it have as it is today. I'm looking forward to what 2020 has in store. But before we get there, let's stop and be thankful and remember the good that has been done and the good that God has done in our life up until this day.